Mandelbrot to a breakthrough. In 1980, he created an equation of his own, one that combined all of the Julius sets into a single image. When Mandelbrot iterated his equation, he got his own set of numbers. Graphed on a computer, it was a kind of roadmap of all the Julius sets, and quickly became famous as the emblem of fractal geometry. The Mandelbrot Set.
It's not easy to describe the Mandelbrot set visually. It looks like a man, it looks like a cat, it looks like a cactus, it looks like a cockroach. It's got little bits and pieces that remind us of almost anything that you can see out in the real world, particularly living things. So it has a character that reminds us of a lot of things, and yet it itself is unique and new.
The Mandelbrot set is real, an absolute thing, no question whatsoever. Any mathematician or any computer scientist or student in a school can study it and find the same, describe the same thing. It's a common experience. And so such things that can be magnified forever and have infinite precision do exist, but they're not touchable.
It's a geometrical shape, an icon, if you wish, which somehow embodies as an example a very important aspect of how the world works. Somebody recently actually called this set the thumbprint of God.
With this mysterious image, Mandelbrot was issuing a bold challenge to long-standing ideas about the limits of mathematics.
The blinders came off, and people could see forms that were always there, but formerly were invisible.
The Mandelbrot set was a great example of what you could do in fractal geometry, just as the archetypical example of classical geometry is the circle.
When you zoom in, you see them coming up again, so you see self-similarity. You see, by zooming in, you zoom, you're zooming in, you're zooming in, and pop. Suddenly it seems like you're exactly where you were before, but you're not. It's just that way down there, it has the same kind of structure as way up here, and the sameness can be grokked.
Now we'll begin our serious exploration of the Mandelbrot set. A voyage which, in fact, could last forever and ever, much longer than the lifetime of the universe. I have here the full set, about 6 inches across. Now, if I blow this up, I'll increase the magnification now 13 times, and you see more and more detail is appearing. And the interesting thing is you see mini Mandelbrots, replicas, almost identical, yet perhaps subtly different, of the original set. And I can go on doing this. Here's a magnification of more than 3,000 times. So the original picture, about 6 inches across, is now half a mile across. And no matter how much we magnified it, a million times, a billion times, until the original set was bigger than the entire universe, we would still see new patterns, new images emerging, because the frontier, the M set, is infinitely complex. And when I say infinitely, I really mean that. Most people, when they say infinitely, they mean only rather big. But this is really infinity. is so remarkable, in fact, astounding, about the Mandelbrot Set?
Shalom, shalom, family. Shalom, shalom.
It's based
Turn
on
it down some. All right, shalom, shalom. That's a great statement, great question. We're going to touch on that. So today, the first thing I want to do is say the Lord's Prayer and then get right to business. So bow with me as we say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen, amen. Shalom, shalom, shalom. So, I have a very interesting statement to make. My statement is this, that one, we're going to look at something based on a biblical narrative, and we're going to base something on the world's narrative. And what we're going to do is actually bring the understanding to light. So first things first, biblical narrative is law. Biblical narrative is over everything else. That's very important. Let's start in the biblical narrative. What do we know about the biblical narrative? Right? Everything began, the biblical narrative says it all began one man, one woman, right? We went over this before, over the understanding of how these families are made and everything. Let me just pull up a family tree just to get a little understanding of these things first. Let's get a biblical family tree first. Noah. So what's important to know is that based on the biblical narrative, Noah is a son of Adam, right? Noah would be a direct son from Adam, but he does have 3 children, and we're going to get a major story within the biblical narrative very early, and it has to do with the sons of Cush. And one of the sons of Cush later on that we're going to look at is we're going to look at some descendants of Shem, of Helm, and basically how he had early dominance over certain areas of the north, not the south. One of the major things we have to understand is that, yes, I'm going to pull up a book over here. Yes, if we look at some of the information in certain books, like the writings of Flavius Josephus, let me just open up one of these, which I have on here. Let me grab the ones that I already have. All right. I'm just going to open up one from the writings of Josephus, and we're just going to look up Nimrod. Right? Because Josephus, he's a first century writer, historian, basically recording what he sees in the time of Nimrod. In fact, we're right here already. All right, so this is going to be basically from some of the writings of the Jews. This is going to be chapter 6 of book 1. It's basically about how every nation was basically, what's also important about this too, is that remember, before the event that you're going to see here that's going to talk about Noah's sons, we also have to remember that there's a time that happens before the people go their ways, that the people, in fact, let's go to the Bible. Let's make sure we go about it by the biblical narrative. Let's go to Genesis. Let's go to, let me see what's a good place real fast. Let's go to 10 and 8. All right. So let's talk about this son of Cush right here. Let's get a little understanding on this, because one thing we have to understand about the narrative is that what it's expressing is actually a very understandable effect and something that we can prove. And that's what we're going to do first. First, we have to understand the sons of Ham. So the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, Canaan, and whatnot, right? Now, what's important is who is one of the first rulers? Nimrod. So it's going to talk about one of the sons right here, a mighty man of the son of Cush, right? And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one of the earth. Now, this is very important. Cush, right? Right after the flood and everything, Ham had sons, right? Remember, the curse is on Canaan. right? Cursed be Canaan, he shall be a servant of servants. Is the curse on Cush though? No, the curse is not on Cush. The curse is on Canaan. That's very important. But it's also, it goes into depth. It's a different understandings that Canaan ends up having a land. He names the land after his name, but that land is later invaded by many different nations. But Cush is who we want to look at real fast, because Cush ends up doing something really interesting, right? Let's keep on looking here about Nimrod. As Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, where is Nimrod and where is Cush? Is Cush in Africa at this time? Do we have any type of information or any thing to show us where Cush is? We can actually note the migration of the children of Cush. We're going to look at that some of the migration of the children of Cush did go into Africa, but we got to note what time frame they end up going into Africa. Let me just put something here so that we can get a little idea of some of the migrations that had happened back. Let me pull something up here. So I'm going to read a famous historical quote. I'm just going to show you the book. In fact, I have the book on here. I'm going to just open up another one. Let me just pull up the book. All right. Right here. Okay, so here's a book that I'm going to get a little read out of. All right. So this book is going to talk about some fairly ancient things. I'm just going to show a little bit what it is. Right. I had talked about this before. It's a message from a merchant in the 1st century. Right. He's just talking about what's going on. It's translated from Greek and everything. And it's going to give us a little understanding of some things, right? This is just going to be a recording of these things, right? Already recorded, saved 1912 and everything, but of early century stuff. So I'm going to put something here. There's an ancient kingdom that there's not a lot of history to, but you can find a lot of history if you look very carefully. It's a kingdom called Punt. And it talks about certain children of Shem and children of Cush. So we're going to look at these children of Cush and certain children of Shem by the name of Jotanites, right? They actually merge together and they're called the Sabians. You see them mentioned in the Bible, right? During the time of Job, it said the Sabians attacked Job's family, right? The Sabians. This is who the Sabians are. The Sabians, it means the second. That's very important. But let's get a little understanding of these things, right? Where are the sons of Cush? So it's gonna let us know a little bit about the individuals. Right here, it doesn't give us exact pinpoints, but we're gonna look at some and get a little understanding. All right. So let's look at what is said of the children of Helm in the writings of Josephus. Now here just talks a little bit about Japheth. Just gonna go a little bit over. All right. So Helm. All right, so any questions, let me know. We're going to touch on those things. All right, so let's back over here. All right, so the children of Ham. And all this is just for educational purposes, as we know that anyone who believes in the Messiah can be saved. This is just the understanding of Ham, Shem, and Japheth and the origins of people. So I don't believe anyone came out of Africa. If anyone has any fossils to prove it, an actual fossil, not just the media's narrative. A lot of times I see people, when they're displaying where people came from, they start them in Africa with no evidence, no fossil, no nothing. But I can show you, that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to show you that we can have fossils and people outside of Africa before we have people in Africa. So let's get a little understanding. So the children of Ham, what did the children of Ham possess? It says, possess the land from Syria and to Anis. I don't know if I say that right. Amminus, right? And then certain areas and certain mountains. But I'm gonna jump right down to Cush. All right, so right here, this is where we're gonna get the one right here. Watch, it says right here. For of the 4 sons of Ham, right? Let us know about those individuals right here. Of the 4 sons, right? Going down to Ham. Remember, he has 4 sons, Cush, Mizraim, which is Egypt, Put, and Canaan, right? Remember the curse of Canaan? That's going to be one of the four sons, one of the four. So 4 of the 4 sons, right? 4 of the 4 sons of Ham, time has not at all hurt the name of Cush. Or you see what's going on there? For the Ethiopians. Now, how are they connected to Ethiopia? That's what we're going to look at today. The historical documents, how the sons of Cush had went into Ethiopia, over whom he reigned, right? Even at this day, both by themselves and by all men in Asia called Cushites, right? You see what's going on there? Just going to talk about a little bit of these individuals, right? Now, let's get an understanding, where is Ethiopia? Now, it's important to understand, I actually got to open up one more thing real fast, right? Because if you look up Ethiopia today, we already know it's in one of the corners of Africa, right? But Ethiopia long ago used to be in a place, right? It used to be in a place deeper into Africa. And maps will help with that. We need to look at older maps to get a little understanding of that. Because remember, there's also the evidence of migration, right? Do they come out of Africa or do they go into Africa? That's the question. Does the children of Cush start in Africa or do they go into Africa? What I'm going to show you today is that they go into Africa. That's very important. But let me show you that with a map here. Okay, so this is a map. I'm going to see if this one's okay. This one's fine, but this is not what I want. I need something a little more than this. Let me just copy this. And if I need to open up one more note just to make it clear, I'll just find it shouldn't be too hard to find a map real fast. I'll show you a map of where you would have certain one of these. Matter of fact, I'm opening up one more thing fast. Get clear. So now the children of Cush, what's important is historically in 18 BC, as far as 18 BC, maybe even earlier, the children of Cush moved into Africa. That's very important. And they moved into Africa moving with the Jotanites, right? And that's another thing we're going to look at. Who are the Jotanites, right? Because the Middle East is very complex. It's very complex, but it's not too complex where we can't really understand it. But it is at a point where it's not, guessing won't help anyone, right? Guessing on these things won't help anyone. We need to look at the facts. Let me just open this up. I'll probably type that all weird. Okay, so let me open up something here just so that we can look at, because I believe maps really help in understanding these things. It's important to have maps with these things. I'll just type it down. All right. This one just has a good map for an example of understanding. So long ago, what's important to understand is that Ethiopia was basically lower into Africa, but there was a way to get into Ethiopia from Arabia, and it was through a nation called Punt. It was through a nation called Punt, right? And that's what we're going to talk about. A nation called Punt that is very important. We're going to talk about it historically and with genetics to get a little understanding of these things. But let me first go to a map here. All right. So make sure I got that the older one. Get a little understanding of these things. All right. So this one, let's get a little understanding. So show this. Let me read a little something here from this little book, which is right here. All right. So watch what it says here. It says about 18 BC, according to the Arab historians, right? Jotanite tribes entered and conquered South Arabia, but were largely, now note what it's saying, the ones in South Arabia were what? Largely absorbed by the Cushite stock. So we just got an understanding that the Shemites and the Cushites were merging together, right? Very important to understand. It just let us know in Saudi Arabia. as a result of which the second or Sabian empire, right, of Ad was formed, right? So it's letting you know that this empire that you see in the Bible called the Sabians, right? In the book of, like, for example, the book of Job, right? Get a little understanding of that, because all we got right here is a little understanding on who they're linked with and everything, right? But I don't know what's going on with this. You get ads popping up and everything. Close that. All right, let's go to Job and go to 1 and 9, just so you can get right to it. Let's go to one of these ones, right? Let's go to Job. And then the peoples very early on in the book of Job that exists, right? And it has to do with historical records. Because a lot of times, read this part of the book, there's a group of individuals that come that at first you may not understand who they are. So right here, in fact, let's go back. Let's just go to 15. Right, we're going to talk about the Sabians. Who were the Sabians and what were the Sabians? Right, it just lets us know. And the Sabians attack and made with them. And they put thy servants to the sword, right? And only one had escaped, right? And everything. But if we look at that word, Sabian, Saba, or Sabi, different things like that, you can see right here, it'll just give us a little understanding. These are descendants of the territory of Southwest Arabia, right? Let's get it, and that's just a short little understanding, right? You get them in other places that they'll talk about these different individuals, right? But early, right? If you know about Job, apparently Job is going to be very early on. Some say even before the Exodus and things like that. Say Job's a very early individual. So what's interesting about that is that the Sabians, is said. Let me finish that read. Let's finish that read right here. It says about the 18 BC, according to the Arab historian Jotanites. So remember Jotan, right? Right now we're talking about sons of Cush, the Cushites. But you can see right here, even a son, Seba. Seba sounds very similar to the second, right? You see what's going on there? That's where you get Nimrod and everything. Dedan, remember we was looking at that? We was looking at these individuals, right? In connection to what? Dedan, right? Seba, you see right there, right? Dedan, see the connections, what's going on here, right? Go back over here. So you can see right there, these individuals, see the connection, right? Sons of Cush. But now we're going to look at the individual Jotan of the son of Shem. So Shem, Jotan, Jotanites. These are all going to be Jotanites. This is a name you'll see a lot. Ophir right here. This name is one of the names that you'll see a lot in areas of Africa and reigning over certain areas. Now, this name right here, this is what we're looking at now. Let's get back to it over here, right? The Jotanite tribes entered and conquered South Arabia, right? But were largely absorbed by the Cushite stock, as a result of which the second or Sabian empire, right, of Ad was formed. So it's let us know who the Sabians are, which we remember, those are the ones we just seen in the biblical narrative, right? The ones that we had seen, right? They would let us know that these are still sons of Noah. Both of them are sons of Noah. This whole group is sons of Noah that attacked Job. So we know that this is after the flood, that this thing is happening, right? Let us know of this event with Job, that these Sabians, right, came, right? And even if we look at that part in Job, right? If we look at that part in Job, does it get a little read on it, right? Remember, that was a whole event where Satan basically was trying to test Job, right? But it says, and the Sabians fell on them. You can see what's going on there. When a messenger came, talk about the Sabians, right? And they talk about the Chaldeans. This thing also talks about the Chaldeans. It also talks about the Chaldeans being a Shemitic tribe. That's very important as well on this book. This book will also talk about the Chaldeans, where you can see right here. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but it does go over some information on the Chaldeans. But let's continue to understand what's going on here. Why am I showing you this? Because the migration route, right? The migration, You can see a little bit. I'm jumping right down. It says right here, when it's talking about the land of Punt, right? A lot of people, when they're looking at the land of Punt, a lot of times you see dark faces. A lot of people say that's not Semitic, but that is Semitic. That's what's the interesting thing about the Shemites. When you think about the Shemites, if you look into the historical reports, you'll start noticing that a lot of the Shemites had darker skin. Now, the reason why that's important is that darker skin is not bound by one race, right? Darker skin is not bound. Like, for example, when you think of people in Africa, you will get majority of dark skin because of the area they're at, right? The UV rays and certain things that are needed for that protection, right? Pigmentation is actually a natural sunscreen, right? In fact, I can show you different haplogroups that have different pigmentation, right? I can show you I groups with dark skin, T groups with dark skin, R groups with dark skin, E groups with light and dark skin, A groups with light and dark skin. Different skin colors can happen in different places. So when you think African, don't just automatically think dark skin, right? Think of a people or a certain group, because Africa is actually diverse with multiple different groups. But what we need to understand here is this Punt, right? If you never heard of Punt, right, it's one of those areas that, if you do a little, it's an area that has a lot of entrance for things. Here's a little idea. So they'll say, you can see right here, just to get a little idea, they'll say this is Punt to get a little understanding of it. We know because they'll talk about how Egypt had some connections to Punt, but they had respect of that empire. So that's what this is actually talking about, is that through the area of Punt, you can see right here, the testimony of Arabia would be at fault if they were, it says, later the Sabian, see what's going on? Later the Sabian Cushites conquered by this person, right? Probably gonna butcher it. Ben Yarub, Jaconite stalk. So this is very important. So it's letting us know that the Sabians, that the same group that we knew was a combination of Jotanites and Cushites, we know that they end up being defeated by some Jotanites again from Yemen, right? Jotanite stocks from Yemen. So remember Yemen, that's why we're looking at Punt, because Yemen is right here. So Yemen is right here. So this is going to be Yemen. And it's saying that more of them from this area came over here and ruled over those individuals. That's what we're seeing over here. We keep on going and get a little understanding of it. It says a Jotanite stock from Yemen migrated into Africa and establishing themselves in Asabania. Now, this is what's important too, this location. Today, if you look up the lands of Africa and you look up Ethiopia, then you'll see that Ethiopia is an area where long ago it used to be another place. I'll show you right here. Real fast. Probably typed it all weird. Probably spelled it wrong. Let me see if I put that weird. No, that's it. I only remember because the little abyss right there. Make sure that last part, there's no A in it. Right there. Let me just put it like that. Just to get a little understanding, well, just to get clarity, this is the area, right? You can see right here. This will be the area that they have went into. So from Yemen and Arabia, going down into this area, and this is one account. There's multiple accounts of Arabians going to that area. For example, the Midianites, right? The Midianites also went down into that area. We know this because we have writings from the books of Flavius Josephus, the same writings where it talks about the sons of Mahdi, or not Mahdi, but from Keturah, the sons from Keturah and Abraham went into that area. Also, we have other historical writings like this one, History of the Moors of Spain, that would talk about pretty much some of the individuals from the Arabian Felix who conducted a people called Sabi, went into Libya, right? And what's important is when you look at an ancient map of Libya during that time, Libya As you can see with these little maps here, this will be some of the areas. It looks kind of chaotic on this, but let me show you a clearer one, right? It's just talk about these people, Sabi, right here, that also moved into these areas and has settled in what is known as Libya. Let me actually show a little picture of that. So right here, Libya, all Upper Africa was called Libya, right? You see Carthage and things like that. This used to be called Libya, but they changed the name of Libya, which was this upper area, into Africa, right? That's what's very important. That's why a lot of times when you think of the lower area, a lot of times they relate it to Africa, because the Sabians, right, the Shemites and some of the Cushites moved together. And it says, into Libya, and made themselves master of that country, established his followers there, and gave it the name Africa, right? This is from a historical document, letting us know a little bit of those Sabians and whatnot. Very, very important to get us a little understanding of those things. And you can see, a little more understanding on that, right? It's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of places where they talk about the Sabians, right? You can see all these different areas where they talk about certain Sabians, right? And Isaiah 45 and 14, thus says the Lord, the labor of Egypt and the merchant of Ethiopia and of the Sabians, right? Men of stature shall come over you, and they shall be yours, and they shall come after you in chains. They shall come over, right? They shall follow you. You see what's going on? What it's saying here? Talk about these Sabians. They're people that, if not known in history, you may not know exactly what's the combination of these Sabians, right? So it brought the Sabians. You see different places where it talks about the Sabians and everything. Let's talk about some of those things right here. It talks about some that Judah are going to sell to the Sabians. He's going to sell some people to the Sabians, but you can see what's going on, get a little understanding. Here's another place, right? We talked about that. His origin and everything. Just talks about a tribe, right? Early progenitors of tribes and of an Ethiopian district, right? Very important to get a little understanding of that, right? We can also look in Flavius Josephus. Abraham's children. Abraham had children with Keturah. Where did they go? It's going to let us know about a certain area that they're going to go into, right? It talks about this certain Orphrein, that he made war against Libya and took it, and that his grandchildren, Abraham's children, took it, and that his grandchildren, when they inhabited it, called it from his name Africa. So you see what's going on there? That's from Flavius Josephus. All these are historical documents and witness to some of the Shemites going early into Africa. That's very important. Some of the Shemites going early into Africa. This is very important to understand, right? This is just some of the pieces of information. Because a long time ago, when the Romans, when certain nations had all of Africa, this little area right here, where you see Carthage, this is actually where they would think Africa is. But long ago, this all used to be Africa. All this used to be Africa, right? And by whom, right? Who were the Africans? Who were the individuals that went down there, right? Those are going to be the actual Arabians, the actual ones who are going to be Shemites. A lot of them are going to be Shemites. But we know which ones are the Hamites. They're the A and B groups. We know because if you look up A on research, you can find out that A was replaced by the E group. A group is replaced by the E group. And that's what we're going to look at today, that A and E are not the same. A and E groups are not the same, yet they have moved together into areas of Africa. Here's just a movement of E1B1B. You can see that E1B1B has a lot of movements going to here, but if you search roots, the oldest E1B1Bs are over here in this area, right? That's very important. Now, why is that important? Because the same areas where you see where Cush went and different individuals have went is also important to know, right? Going back over here, it's important to know that that's where a lot of Shemites went as well, right? So remember, it let us know that some of the Shemites, some of the ones over here have ruled from areas of Ethiopia, yes, but also from Syria and things like that, right? What's also important is that, let me go over a little bit. If we look at the Shemites, I'm just going to go to where we get some of the Shemites here. But before that, you can see right here where it talks about Nimrod. We'll talk about Nimrod and the Sabians a little more. But first, let me give you an understanding with the Shemites. Notice the Shemites dwelled from basically the Indian River or the Indian Ocean to basically the Levant. We know this because it'll tell us right on here that they was in Damascus, right? In Palestine, the areas between Palestine and certain areas. So it's giving us a little understanding. That's why you find Shemites in the Levant, right? We talk about the Natufian and things like that. They're found in the Levant, right? In connection to the Chaldeans and things like that, with different things like that. So very, very important. Let's go back to the part of Ham. All right, so let's get a little understanding here. To get a little understanding when it talks about the children of Ham. So right here, let's talk about Nimrod a little bit. So right here, it just talks about that, yes, a lot of the children of Ham, a nation of the Western Ethiopians, yes, that's right. In the parts of the West Africa, you'll have a lot of Hamites, but not on the east side of Africa. Let me show that. A lot of times you find E groups going into the East Africa. That's very important. East Africa, Shemites would. West Africa, and we're talking deep Africa, right? Later on, you'll get Arabian Shemites. The first time you ever see Shemites going to Africa, it's mentioned that a lot of them went downwards into this area of Africa. It's very important. Other things are known by migrations, but a lot of the Hamites have settled in Libya early on. They settled in a lot of these early areas early on. They also were here as well, some. But they're going to be moved out when the Shemites start moving in there more and more. So remember, Damascus, this area over here, that's where we're going to have Shemites settled at. And we know that some was over here as well, in the areas of Yemen. And we know that they have migrated into the areas now called Ethiopia, where you get Abyssinia. So you're going to have a lot of different areas down there due to areas of Punt. This area was called a nation called Punt that had ties with Egypt. Later on, you start knowing them as the Nubians and things like that. That's very important because the Nubians were actually stronger. A lot of people don't know this. The Nubians was actually stronger than many nations above. Many nations. The Nubians. A lot of people could not pierce through them until the time of modern weapons. The Nubians were very skilled archers. They was a very powerful nation. Now let's get back over here. All right, so again, if any questions, let me know. Let's dive a little deeper. Look what it says right here about the ones in Ethiopia. As did the Sabians to the Sabians, right? See what's going on there? Why is that important? Because that's just important to understand that it's let us know that certain people to certain connections. So you can see this individual of Cush has connections to the Sabians, which we had touched on right here, which you can see Seba. You can see right there, just letting you know that these individuals, even Sheba, all these individuals have connections to those individuals. Let's go back over here and look. So it says, but Nimrod, the son of Cush, right, said, and what did he stay? Where did he settle at? At Babylon. So remember, where is Babylon? Cush didn't come out of here. Cush was around these areas. And remember, Syria was the area where it said that Cush also was dwelling. And then it said that he went to Syria. I mean, from Syria, he went from this area where also the Shemites were. The Shemites and the Hamites were in Damascus, right? We also can see that same idea on a map. Let's go to, let's see. There's an old map in the 1800s that kind of illustrates this fairly enough to understand right here. Let's click it. So you can get a little idea from different maps, right? Japheth stayed up here. Japheth stayed in this area, but the D and E groups, like the D group and over here, and there's also E1s that stayed over here and other E groups that stayed over here, right? In Pakistan and things like that, right? Your E1, B1Bs and stuff like that. For example, just to have a quick witness You know, we could just type down on one of the papers E1, B1B, to get a little idea. I'll just go to some ideas on here. So here's a little idea. This one's in Pakistan. So you can see E1B1B, right? This is going to be in Pakistan because we already talked about before the movements and everything. This one will be in Pakistan. This will be modern time in Pakistan. But let's get some ancient ones. Let's look at for some ancient fossils, whatnot. So this one's in Jordan. This one we know. This is the Gasulians, right? The Gasulian Empire, the Gasulian nation that is not known, written in the Bible, but it's a nation that is named, right? The Gasulians, pre-pottery Neolithic. This is gonna go down a little more. This one right here, you can see this E1B1B. And this one would be in Iran. So you can see what's going on there. So very, very 3,000, 2,000 years ago, right? Because I believe a lot of E1B1B are Arabians, different Jotanites and Eberites and things like that, right? Brothers and relatives of the Shemites. Here's another one. Another E1B1B, Turkestan, right? What's that? Probably Goner Tate. How you say that? See what's going on there. Goner, Bronze Age, right? Turkestan. These are going to be the Arabians. Here's another one. E1B1B, Turkestan, right? Here's one, Armenia. Talked about that. This is E1B1B in Armenia, right? 14,000 BC, 11,000 BC, Armenia. So to get us a little understanding. Here's some more in Pakistan. So that's what I'm showing you is that the from Iran, Pakistan, right, in the area of Armenia, from these areas, right, the E groups actually stretched out this way. They actually stretched out this way, going out this way, and the D group as well. And that's what we see written, that it will tell us that the Shemites actually ruled from the Indian Ocean and whatnot. So you see what's going on there. That's the Indian Ocean, pretty much. So letting us know that a connection of all these areas, Pakistan and India, these different ones are going to be connected in this area here. So they're coming from here, and over here. So they're reaching all in these areas, right? In Armenia, right? From these areas, a bend around, right? Getting a little understanding there. So and we notice that from maps, right? We notice this same thing. If we look at maps, you can see some of the Shemites that came from this way, right? D group, Japanese, right? E group is the ones that settled over here, that also came over here into these areas. The E groups stretched over here into these areas, right? So you can see Pakistan. That's a long time ago. I don't know if I showed that year on there, right? You see that? 14,000 BC, right? Or 1400 BC, right? That's Bronze Age. So you can see what's going on there. This one too is up there. I'm thinking this in the same area, Pakistan, yeah. South Asia. You can see this E1B1B. This is going to be the Shemitic lineage. Another one, Pakistan. That one, same thing, about 1100 BC. So 1192 BC to 80 or 824 BC. All right, see what's going on there. Get a little understanding of that E1B1B. These are actually the real Shemitic lineages, right? You see that DE there? That's the start of the Shemitic lineages. The DE is also in Pakistan. So you can see right there, the DE. That's what we were talking about, DE and E. You can see those ones. And those ones will be, as you see right here, these are all going to be 12,000 BC to 800 BC. So that's a long time ago. That's in areas where we expect to find Shemites, right? So you got some in different areas, settled in different areas. That's why we were saying they're not Hamites, because they actually reach further into the Indian Ocean. That's very important. But the A and B groups, they mostly settle down in the south, right? Go back over here. So you can see when you look at this, it's important to note, right? On this one, that green right there is Eber, right there, that little green. Let me see if this will work. This little green right here where it says Eber, these are going to be the individuals of Eber. But you can see green right here to here in that area. Because if you look at the Akkadians, that's the movement of the Akkadians, right? Talk about the ancient Akkadians. So you can see that's going to be the movement of the Akkadians. Let me just view it a little closer. Also, Shemites were over here. This is why I talked about that some of the Shemites were over here and they moved over here. That's important too. I found ancient E's that are old E1B1Bs and E's that were over here. And those met with some of the U6 and went down. They went down through the little Levant, through the Mediterranean. That's very important. Now, notice that you in the yellow, notice what the yellow is, Helm. So it's letting you know that in the yellow are children of Helm, right? That's very important. It's letting you know that, yes, some of the Helmites had this area, right? But areas like Punt, not Put, where you see Libya and stuff like that, that's Put, P-H-U-T. I'm talking Punt, P-U-N-T, Punt, which is actually not up here, but down here, where you actually had the Sabians or Seba, right? Seba going down over here. So sons of Shem mixing over in these areas, right? And they go down here and they settle in these areas. That's very important. It's going to let us know that the Seba, the individuals, are going to be going into these areas, mixing with individuals of Cush. So that's very important. It's going to give us a little understanding of those things. That's very, very important. And obviously, this is understanding the biblical narrative, but we're gonna take it a step further and show that, you know, as the biblical narrative expressed that the people started here and they went into their different ways, we can actually show that before they went into Africa, people went down, when they had settled out, when they got off of the ark, that a lot of them went into these areas, into the further areas. So got to be careful when you see these illustrations, right? Remember, this isn't a law. You see this where it says the Jotanites went up here. Is that what historical documents say, that Jotanites only went up here? No. We do know that E groups are over here, but some of the Jotanites went down here. The E and D groups went over here. Yes, there's D and E groups in surprising areas in the north. But they did settle in here and they did go down into Africa. It's very important. And that's what we're going to look at. And we know that the D and E group is actually the Shemites. That's very important. So when you think of the Shemitic nation that mixed into these little areas, like Havilah and things like that, you got to also remember that a lot of them have mixed in with some of the Hamitic nations. So that's how they get a certain females and certain mixes, right? So you'll see a lot of designs like that. To understand, like this one is just missing some of the historical information that talks about how Shem went down here. But if we look at haplogroup D goes over here. Haplogroup D from Shemites go all the way over here. The Shemites go this way. Japheth stays in the north, right? Japhetic lines you'll find up here a lot of times, but they do come down. That's important to note later for certain migration, certain information. The Middle East is like the middle area. It's like the certain pot. But we can find separations with certain groups, because if we note that Mount Ararat will be in that certain area over here, then you can note certain hablo groupings. You can note, because the reason why you want to note that is because the people were not separated by race. After the top, when Nimrod, let's go back to over here and talk about Nimrod. Okay. Yep, that's right. Adam would not originate in Africa. Nor is there fossils older in Africa than outside of Africa. That's very important. There's older fossils outside of Africa than inside Africa. That's very important. So what we actually know, what you can note here, is that it's going to let us know a little bit about that Nimrod that settled at Babylon, right? Remember, Babylon's over here, right? Not in Africa. It's very important. Does it say? In fact, remember, what does the Bible say concerning what happened with Nimrod? It actually says something. It says that he called them downwards, right? So a little bit of those Sabians. Let's go back to Genesis 10 and 15. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what Nimrod did. Let's go a little bit over and talk about what Nimrod did. Okay, so look what it says right here. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. So before they was divided, they was all united. And they made a little building, right, in the area of Babel, right? A little area of Babel. Remember, Nimrod was over that. He was all over that, causing the people to do this thing, right? Just going to skip a little ahead right here, because this just talks about, what happened. He went down and confused the language and split them, and they all went their ways, right? We know what that was. That was during the time of Nimrod, right? In fact, right here, this is where he blessed them and everything, right? We go a little bit over. This right here is where we're going to get right here. They talk about and began the beginning of his kingdom, the son of Nimrod, a son of Cush, right? Cush begot Nimrod. He was a mighty one on the earth, right? And he basically ruled, and this will be a Hamite, a bloodline Hamite. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, right? Babel, the same one that was divided. And then it talks about the land was Shinar, right? Let's know that was Shinar. And that's what's important, is because Nimrod called the people down. He called the people down, right? It lets us know that the people were in a certain area, but he called them downwards. But it's also important to know that a lot of people of Canaan and certain people of the different individuals, you got to note where they came from, right? Where they come from, where they go, right? Where was their little areas, right? Let you know different things and whatnot. Now let's go back over here. And let's get a little understanding on this part right here. So, as we already informed you, now all just let you know about what happened about that individual, how Nimrod has settled them in the areas of Babel. All right, we'll go over a little more and talk about what happens real fast. All right, just now it's going to talk about. Let me go. Where is it? Right, and remember, it'll talk about that the Shemites were in the area of the Chaldeans and things like that. Let me go back over here to where Nimrod is, right here. So this is going to be a little information concerning the Tower of Babel, right? Where were the people before they got split? At the Tower of Babel. So it's going to talk about Shem, Japheth, and Ham, right? Bore 100 years before the deluge and everything. It says that all these individuals were born before the flood. These first of all descended from the mountains into the plains. So they came from the mountains to the plains and fixed their habitation there. So some was afraid to go into the lower grounds. It says, now the plain in which they first dwelled was called Shinar. So some was in the mountains, some was in the plain where Shinar was. So some was in the mountains and some was in the plains where Shinar was. So some was above in the mountains. There's no mountains below it. You can see that the mountains will be a little above it, right? And that's going to give us a little understanding of what's going to happen next. Let's jump a little down to where we get Nimrod. Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an effort, to contempt of God and of affront and contempt of God, right? Such a affront and contempt of God, right? He was the grandson of Helm, son of Noah, a bold man, right? Great in strength of hand, right? So he was like one of the leaders of that time, right? Right. And basically he wanted to, get the people to come together because he didn't want the people to go through another flood. So he's talking about basically, he also said that he would revenge on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, right? So he built a tower and everything. He built a tower too high for the waters to be able to, reach. See what's going on there? But you can see right here, now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod, right? Very important. So Nimrod had caused the people to go into the valley, right? Remember, Shinar is in the valley. So it's having the people to go into the valley, right? And that valley, that valley, the place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon. So Babel is in Babylon and Shinar, right? So we get a lot of that talked about, right? So that's the area where there was confusion, right? At the Tower of Babel, right? Which actually means confusion. Very important. So it makes mention that that little area was where the people were. Where when they get off the ark and the people settled, is mentioned by multiple historians that they were in the area where you have right before you have Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. That's actually where you get some of the earliest civilizations in the Mesopotamia, Fertile Crescent, where you get Shinar and Sumer and things like that. All right, so let's go back over here. So the reason why that's important is because migrations are important. The way people move are important. Now that's concerning the biblical narrative, right? They went down to this area and they would have settled in Ethiopia, right? They would have went down this area and they would have settled in Ethiopia. That's what would have happened. A lot of Shemites would have went down into this area and they would have seen that as a place that the Shemites had settled. So it would have caused a lot of people migrating into there, right? Because migrations happen. That's something that just happens. This is important. Now, speaking of migrations, what we didn't establish is that no one began in Africa, but we do have people moving into Africa. Here's another place just talked about during the time of the Jews later on, that Muhammad had dominance in Palestine, Arabia, and Egypt, and Abyssinia, and basically, that's when it caused a lot of the Jews in that area to move again into Africa, right? It says the land next to Judea contained the largest number of Jews was Egypt, right? That's Africa. So the largest number of Jews, right? Based on the history of 1,000 years of Jewish history from the days of Alexander the Great, right? To basically the Muslim conquest of Spain, all right? By Marcus Henry Harris in 1904, right? Documenting all the historical documents, knows that, as it was said, a lot of the Jews were in Africa, right? So they were being persecuted downwards. And you can see when it's talked about, when we're talking about these things, other Shemites have went into those areas, into lower areas and whatnot. That's just something that's important to know, right? Where we had talked about in different things, right? While Africa has sometimes been basically, seen on an account to the early, remember we talked about the connection of the Shemites and the Indian Ocean. That's why I was showing that right here real fast, is that if you look at the information that was known on the Shemites, they didn't always start in in different areas. They had connections with the Indian Ocean, right? In fact, let me see, it's right here in the Children of Shem, right here. It says Shem, the third son of Noah, had 5 sons who inhabited the land that began at Euphrates and reached to the Indian Ocean, right? Talked about some of those things and whatnot. And then we talked about some of the migration and everything. So that's just important to note right here. So talk about these individuals from the Indian Ocean. So an account early Indian Ocean world, studies of food, globalization, obviously giving us a certain understanding of what was in that land. It just lets you know that basically Africa has dispatched and received extraordinary range of plants, animals, and foodstuffs through the Indian Ocean trade and other revenues. So basically what it's saying here is that, I already went over this, that parts of Africa, this area of Africa, because there were Shemites over here, there were migrations, there were movements with this water here going over here. So you had different movements of people going from here and here and even around these areas. So all this was actually connected. All these was actually fairly connected by water. That you have things from here going over here and things from here going over here. So it's just letting you know that they had a lot of connection like that, right? That's very, very important. So let us know The sons of Shem had connections with the Indian Ocean. And from this reading, it lets us know that a lot of the food plants and food share, right, and different things came through the Indian Ocean and other avenues, right? So early finds of broom corn millet in Yemen and Sudan predate evidence of overland adoption in Mesopotamia and Egypt. So a lot of times people talk about the Mesopotamian and Egypt trades, but Yemen and Africa and the Indian Ocean had a lot of trades going on, right? Suggesting a similar maritime route once the crop reached South Asia. So you see what's going on there? So that's from the Indian Ocean food globalization in Africa. So you can see what's going on there. So a lot of connections with different peoples, right? Different peoples going in different areas and everything. But let's continue on in understanding this. The reason why that's important is because based on the biblical narrative, from Shem, Japheth, and Helm, none of these started in Africa. None of these started in Africa. Now there are pre-flood people who, remember, from Adam to Noah, it said that they filled the earth. So can we find evidence of people outside of Africa before people inside Africa? Yes. And that's what we was talking about before, that when we talk about things like America, let me just show this. I haven't got on this note in a long time, but some of the most interesting studies is when you start looking to North America and South America in ancient times. You start finding some very interesting stuff. What's sure and without a doubt, they'll say that people came from here to here, but there's no evidence of linking them here. But there's evidence of linking them to here. There's evidence of linking them here, just like how the biblical narrative expresses that people started over here. And it actually is evident that people went across over to these areas. That's very evident by genetics and by other pieces of information. A lot of different pieces of information that can give us knowledge of the movements of peoples and everything. So one of the larger groups that we'll see known as being some of the people that went to the north are the C groups, the N groups, and the Q groups. So a large portion are the Q groups, but they're in relation with R. But let's talk about something real fast. When we think about these years, these long years, they'll say that supposedly 500 million years ago, there were no humans. But we have evidence of humans in those said layers, right? For example, if I just start and want to get a good understanding of who and where were people, I would want to understand, what's the oldest fossil or the oldest finds we have of peoples, right? Now, what's interesting, I'm just going to jump down a little bit and I'm going to point something out. Let me just point something out here on some things. There's a lot of different fossils that were found, like this one in Crete, right? It talks about people early on might have settled in Crete before they went anywhere else, right? It'll talk about 6 million year old footprints, multiple footprints, right? Oldest footprints of pre-humans identified in Crete said 6 million years ago. See what's going on there? So some old footprints and everything. They also got old tools that are said 400 million years old, finding tools, right? These tools that is clearly made by humans that were found in areas that they said where, what's the word I'm looking for? They'll say humans wasn't there. They'll say humans wasn't in that time, right? But we actually find it to be otherwise, right? So when you think of creation, evolution, there's a lot of information on different finds and old things that if you look at carefully and you examine what's there, you can be sure that the world that we live in is not as old as people think it is what I'm concluding. Because when they say that certain things are millions and billions of years old, it's interesting how that can be matched with similar information, similar studies. Like, for example, I was talking about this one of some early humanoids that may be close to the links of Adam and Eve. So it's some tiny humanoids, right? The first people of New Zealand. Now, that's interesting because the location is not in Africa. And the age of these things, they say is multiple millions of years old, multiple millions of years old. So it's fairly interesting to see, to get a little idea of it. Let me actually show it right here. Just pull down right here. In fact, I'm gonna go back over here and kind of explain it before I show it. So that was a find of basically tiny humans, and this is what they concluded. It says what they found instead astonished them, not only because of what it was, but because of its age. We tested the fossils and have determined without a shadow of a doubt that they are at least 6 million years old. Right? Talks about Dr. Marley of Cambridge University told us, right? 6 million year old jellyfish first appeared. So it's saying that they're found in layers where there were said 6 million year old jellyfish, right? On these little finds right here. And this little find, this little thing right here, right? It's said to be found in an area of, I was talking about before, an ancient prehistoric rainforest in Antarctica, right? New Zealand. So very important to understand that in Antarctica long ago, right? Millions of years ago, they know that Antarctica used to have no ice. And in fact, it had connection. The areas were connected with Australia and had a land bridge with South America. So South America, Antarctica, Australia had some connections, right? That's very important. Now, the reason why that's important is because based on these finds, the out of Africa idea is false. So someone would have to prove that humans began in Africa. That's what they would have to prove. They have to show it with a fossil. They would have to show it with a fossil because what we actually know is that if we look more careful, right? If we look more careful, let me just show something real fast. We just go to something. And that's also my challenge to anyone that says that people started in Africa. Can they prove it? Can they show it with an actual fossil? Can they show that a person actually began in Africa? Can they actually show that? Because that's something I've never seen. Whenever they talk about people in the lands of Africa, it's always a conclusion without any facts. There's always a conclusion without any facts. Let me just restart this little list here and show something. So now if you notice here, what I'm pointing at is A00. These are the earliest finds of modern humans. Today, you can see humans today with A00. The earliest one was said 121,000 years ago in Russia in Denisovan caves. In fact, it may be that humans have a high connection to Denisovans. So you can see right here, the Denisovan cave. This actually would be Paleolithic. So this is said where humans came from. Because if you look up A00, this fossil that I'm showing you here, right? This one is actually A00. If I take A00, just put haplogroup of it, I will quickly understand that A00, right? They'll say it goes up to 30,000 years ago and things like that, but there's been no fossil found of it in Africa that's older than the one that's out of Africa. So right here, it'll let you know the earliest known branches is A00. So A00, right? Going back over here to the little information, or rather, yeah, let me close that. Right? That's what I'm showing that's why I'm showing you this information, because if we think about where did people start, 100,000 years ago, we go outside of Africa. So people outside of Africa before they're in Africa. And that's something that at times you don't see information like that, even though it's a ring. So you can see right here, Russia, this is A00, outside of Africa. So outside of Africa, A00. All people began outside of Africa, because that's the oldest fossil. That's the oldest fossil that you can find. In fact, that's why I was doing this, because if you look at Africa, right, they're supposed to be a little earlier than the Paleolithic. They say that this is when people came out of Africa. But if you get a little idea of what they found, things like that, look at the Y chromosome. Hold on. All right, I just had to reset real fast and kind of let's bring this information home, and then let's see if the screen shows here. There we go. I clicked it. There we go. All right, so let's bring it home with some information, some real information. So right here, right, like I said, if you look at this A00, we can note the sources and connect all those different things and everything, and note the migration and everything. But unless someone can show me an older fossil of humans, modern humans older than this one, humans started over here. In fact, when they have left Mount Ararat, it said that some went up to the mountains and some went to the valley. So some went up to the mountains and some went to the valley. That's very important. Some went up to the mountains, some went to the valley, right? That's very important. So that's very, very important to understand that different individuals in different times that we have to note of modern humans, connect them to their root, don't start in Africa. So that's something that someone would have to show you a fossil. Someone had to show you a fossil of a lineage, a human lineage that's in Africa, said older than 100,000 years ago. They got to find one like 200, 300,000 years ago, or said 150,000 years ago, right? They got to find something that's really old to claim that people came out of Africa, when that's not supported by the biblical narrative, and it looks like genetics is not supporting it either. That's why there's a paper called Reconstruction of Outer Africa not having enough proof. Reconstruction of Outer Africa not having enough proof. All right. All right. So let's bring this home. Let's bring it to understand. So this is just one little study, right? And that's why I was showing you that with this little study right here, New Zealand and everything. It should be known where where that is. Let me just show real fast a map. Right. Let's put it on the map. Or I could have used Google Maps. Google Maps would be a little better. Let me just use that to Google Earth. Google Earth open real fast and just show that real fast that humans, early humans, not all humans were giants. Not all humans were giants, but there were humans that were giants. So that's what we're seeing now, is that we're like in a kind of like a mid. So understanding. So you can see. Zoom out a little bit. Remember I talked about how that. So you can see a little understanding with these two. So it's getting us a little understanding. So you can see right here, this, and this. And it will let us know about the movements of different individuals. So this, it just talks about those tiny humanoids and whatnot and everything. Getting a little understanding of peopling and peoples in certain areas and whatnot, and where they were, right, in connection to certain areas, right? The Jurassic area, right? Mid-Jurassic. They'll say 160 million, right? Very, very interesting. Connecting South America and North America is very, very interesting because it's connecting multiple continents together, but also finding humanoids there. They say right here, Central America allows us to narrow our, they say, war dating to certain things and everything. Just talk about certain redheads and whatnot that was there. And connecting of Australia, whatnot. Let's talk about end movements and everything. But let me get back to this. So that's just one piece. There's a lot of different videos and a lot of different information on them and everything that talks about these things and whatnot. But there's no doubt when we think about movement and people going into Africa and out of Africa and whatnot, we can find people outside of Africa before you find people in Africa, right? Just let's talk about possible human ancestor lived in Spain 700,000 years ago. You can see what's going on there. Daily science. Just talk about some humans that they found tools and things like that. They say the first Europeans that settled over there in the areas of Spain. Now I talked about that before, that people like the Neanderthals, they were mixing with individuals like Shem that was in Russia, that was close to the Denisovans caves. So that's very important to note that Shem being in Russia, next to the Denisovans caves with that close A00 break off, these individuals have connection to those, right? And I talked about it, that the flood had caused a lot of this high, when you see these large years and whatnot, right? Where they talk about right here, another site where Hanada, basically humanoid, basically fossils, right, have been found, right? And they talk about the fossils can be as old as 1 million to 1.8 million years, right? It just talks about those fossils having old ages, and we're talking Spain, right? Southern Spain, right? These are old individuals in different areas, right? Early ones that were found in certain areas, right? Very important. Get a little understanding on the movement of certain people, right? Because they'll try to say the Earth is what, billions of years old. They say the Earth's billion years history and stuff like that, but the Earth isn't really that old. All these things that you see here is important to understand that a lot of times there's always information coming out. If you look carefully, you will have a clear understanding that the world isn't as old as they think it is, or what they want to make it, right? Because there's a lot of information that baffles scientists, right? The oldest human dug up in Spain, pits, right? 100,000 years old, right? So when did people come out of Africa and whatnot? If you got other humans in different areas, and they talk about basically the Neanderthals have cousins called Denisovans, and I showed you that modern humans also was in the areas of Denisovans and things like that. But it just talks about basically a missing link, right? Missing link between the Neanderthals and their mysterious cousins, the Denisovans. You see what's going on there? They talk about these individuals, but it says the remains of at least 28 ancient humans have been found at the bottom of this 12-meter long vertical shelf, right? Very important. Just let you know that it finds those humans 400,000 years ago. So you can see what's going on there. Long time ago, these humans found there. So very, very important. So you got to ask yourself, is all of a sudden, some people just popped up out of nowhere in Africa, totally different than any other human? I don't think so. That's one of those things that we gotta look at very careful. This is just some other information on something else. It's just some really interesting, something interesting. But these are the type of things that I'm talking about, that when you think about the world we're living in, you got to take the biblical narrative for what it's saying, because if you don't, the illustration of millions and billions of years is more cartoonish than to take Harry Potter as a historical document. So it's that clear when you start looking at these things carefully. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because people don't begin in Africa, and modern humans don't begin in Africa. Modern humans do not begin in Africa. That's just something that's important to know. That we can find modern humans, the migration all over the world, but they don't begin in Africa. We can find them in early places, early on, right? Said places that will be very early, and going overseas into America and things like that, and settle in different areas, right? They'll talk about this connection to the land bridge and everything into certain areas, right? I'm gonna show you one more piece, one last little thing. Let me just cut these down and bring it home. So I'm just gonna bring these here. So that's why we was looking at these things very carefully and reading these books and understanding where did they come from, where did they go, right? And migration routes, right, from the areas of the Levant into Africa, right? And getting the understanding of real roots, the real roots. Because remember, I was talking about this, that CT actually is DECF. That CT is actually CDET, or that's why it's called CT, right? This is actually CT, right? That's CT. Originally, it was called CDET, or DECF, right? CDEF, you can see right there, is the same thing. That M68, that's just a CT. CT made DEYAP and CF P143. That's what I was talking about. And that they actually were in Eurasia and migrated into Africa. That's very important. And actually, they was connected with your basal L3. That your CT actually had your L3 with it outside of Africa. That's very important. It's a little understanding on that. Let me go up a little bit. So that's what I was showing you. I was showing you that people actually began over here. With the people over here, the Neanderthals came and they were known to mix with the Denisovans. And I was talking about that we have information of a mom as a Neanderthal and a dad as a Denisovan, that A00, and a mom as a Neanderthal. And we was talking about that with the Isham and the R haplogroup mixing in. And you get your A's and you get your R's and whatnot. And they found out that they were mixing the Denisovans. So humans began around this area when the Neanderthal and the Denisovan connect together, and they have moved into these areas. That's very important, that they have moved into those areas, right? So that's what we was looking at. Put this right here. So that's why if you look at some of the oldest finds, right, even in Russia, Spain, right, you can find that people was not in, you can see right here, one of the oldest finds of humans, Spain, people was not in Africa for a long time, right? People was not in Africa or the lands of Africa for a long time. Speaking of which, that's why I had opened this thing right here so that we can get a quick look at the map here. This little map, just to get a little understanding. You can see, right? Whenever they show out of Africa, they always say, oh, people came out of Africa. But there's never, where's the fossil? Is there a fossil I can click to find who is in Africa? But they show people outside of Africa. You can see right here for F-M89, F-M89 not in Africa. You can see this one. This said some A0 outside of Africa, Denisovan cave. You can see this one, K2. That's probably Isham, right? That's Isham. Yep, that's Isham. That's going to be Isham. So K with an R, mtDNA. You see what's going on there? This said early humans. Your C's. Remember I was talking about that. The C groups are early humans. So C groups. And the thing is, they're so diverse. They're so diverse and said the earliest time. And that's said out of Africa, right? Where's the fossil inside Africa? Where can we link them to and say that they're all linked to this area, right? You can't, because there's no fossil that's older than the ones outside of Africa, right? There's no fossil. We'll go back over here. This is said the earliest time frame, the Paleolithic time frame. If I go to a map and I look for things that are in Africa, you obviously know I'm not going to find nothing. But if I look up in the upper areas, I'll find a lot of lineages outside of Africa, right? C's and other ones, F's and whatnot. So that's something that's just important to note, that when you're looking into these things, you got to look very carefully and understand that if you want to conclude that someone's in Africa, they got to prove it, right? If someone wants to conclude that people began in Africa, they need to prove it. And there's no fossils of it. There's no fossils. There's no finds of people in Africa. The people started outside of Africa, right? I would love for someone to prove it, that people started in Africa with a fossil, with a human fossil, with an actual haplogroup, a human fossil, right? Because what I showed you was an 800, 120,000 years ago, Middle Paleolithic in Russia. So that's 100,000 years ago. Sometimes I be seeing people with charts. Let me show you an example. I see people do stuff like this. They just look at the classic haplogroup chart. Just go to one, a classic one, right? And they'll take something like this. They'll take something like this. I just go to a simple one. Let's go to a simple one. So I can show you multiple channels, multiple different people that say they study genetics, and all they do is take what they say with no evidence at all, and say that they came from Africa. Let's take an example here. Let's see. Let's say one that says origins, right? Let's see one from, maybe, let's just go over. It shouldn't be too hard. This one, they'll talk about, these are all, remember I showed you that 800 outside of Africa, right? So you can see they'll say that this is not that long ago. See this 2000 KYA? Can you show me a human fossil 200,000 KYA in this area? That's the thing. They don't have one. They don't have a fossil in that area. But that's the conclusion. But remember, I already showed you 800 over here, 100,000 years ago, right? So prove it. Prove it with a fossil. Prove it with a fossil. And we can find L3 in Syria, said 100,000 years ago, right? And remember, that's because they're using that out of Africa scale while putting it next to a fossil. I already talked about that before when I talked about L3. There's the same L3 that said 9,000 years ago in a fossil, is when you put it to the out of Africa scale, is 100,000 years old. The same L3. I showed that before. That's important to know. Let me show. Let's go to family tree. Or let's go to type Adam. I'm showing this for real because I try to see if that out of Africa thing is true, and I try to find fossils, actual real fossils, and it's not true. It's not true because ancient genetics is modern, and we don't have all the fossils to determine if people started in Africa. And a lot of these lineages aren't even found in Africa. A lot of these lineages, a lot of the A lineages, that's why there's a paper called Reconstruction Out of Africa Not Having Enough Proof. But this is how people usually design it. They usually design A becoming this and then CT, and then they always put F outside of Africa because they don't want to make F African, because that's where you get your modern European lineages from. But a lot of them end up becoming lineages that settle in Africa. But remember that C, D, E, F began over here. And that's where your E's come from. Your E's first settle over here. And your D's go over here. That's why D is over here. You see the D right there. So D's go over there as Shemites move over here. And the E's are over here. So this is just really important information that the out of Africa concept is false, right? The out of Africa concept is false. That's just very important. That a lot of these are not based on fossils. These are not based on fossils, right? There's a lot of what's what I'm looking for? Designs like that. A lot of designs like that. I can show some pages that do that. I'm not gonna do them like that right now. I'm not gonna put their page on blast, but there are some pages that need to correct their understanding of how these things are implemented. And if they can prove that based upon modern humans, said 200,000 years ago, based upon modern humans, see this A group, they say 150,000 years ago. If they can show that age in Africa, then that would show something. But they cannot, because there's no A lineage that's human that's in Africa that long ago. They just conclude that because people are dark skinned. That they'll put no. Remember, you see what you see right there on this. Let me just zoom in on this. This thing's kind of blurry, but little ideas when they put things like that. I'm gonna put migration of Y DNA, right? And all this is just movie. This is just movie magic. That's what you're seeing here, right? Show them to show a fossil and prove it with a fossil. Like family tree DNA, this is all modern information. Family tree DNA is using all modern information. So get a little understanding, right? Show one of these with a fossil. Show one of these with an actual fossil, and we'll talk sources, right? But there's no fossils. That's the thing. There's no fossils on these things. You can see this one. I'm not gonna click that. This one has nothing really. So just to get a little understanding, is that it's known for migration. If you try to put people here, they'll say that people came out of Africa 60,000 years ago, but I showed you modern humans outside of Africa before that. So fossils is what I'm concluding is this. Based on the biblical narrative, no one started in Africa. And based on fossils, no one started in Africa, right? Unless you take the conclusion that people started here and you don't want to even see the evidence. You just want to say that people started here, right? That's what they want to conclude, that people started there and there's no evidence. There's absolutely no evidence that people started there. There's no evidence. That's one of the biggest things that is what I'm saying, is that people did not start in Africa. So get understanding that. If you even try to find proof of it, and if you find something, if someone does find something, show me, because I've been searching for a long time and I can't find nothing that makes a human out of Africa, that puts all humans don't start in Africa. That's just a fact. All humans don't start in Africa. Your A00 is the starting branch, and it's outside of Africa, said 121,000 years ago in Denisovans areas. So humans are basically close to Denisovans. So that's just something to consider when talking on these things. So based on the biblical narrative, humans are not out of Africa. And based on the scientific method, humans are not out of Africa. So that's what I'm concluding here, is that based on migration, based on information of people going into Africa, yes, there is a large portion of people in Africa, but Africa is not where humans come from. And I would love for someone to prove it. Someone needs to prove it, that modern humans came from Africa. So modern humans do not come from Africa. So that's a solid fact. And if someone says no, they have to prove it with an actual fossil of a modern human in Africa, and showing how those humans are connected to all humans today. So you'll never see that. But this is the generation that's taken over by media. So Don't believe them. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe media. Tell them to prove it. Tell them to prove it so that we can have the evidence. It's never been proven. That's why it's called the Outer Africa theory. It's an Outer Africa theory because it has not been proven. So you could try to prove it. In fact, just to show, I just typed down oldest fossil in Africa, right? You'll get some very interesting pieces of information that try to connect them, right? They'll talk about this one. That's just 36,000 years ago, right? Where's the oldest fossil in Africa? Can you show me the oldest human fossil right here? Here's a little attempt. There's a little idea, a little paper. Oldest human fossil from Eastern Africa, about 30,000 years older than science has thought. So they say, oh, it's much older than what science has had thought, where it was. So it says right here, and then watch what it says here. New research indicates the fossils were buried in a volcanic eruption about, they say, 230,000 years ago. Know what's interesting about it? Watch. So what you got to find out is this fossil, right? Because if we're talking modern humans, or are we talking the fossils of people? Of a genetic fossil of a haplogroup of a modern human. You'll see right here when they talk about Omo. They'll call it Omo. They say for decades the Omo bones were the oldest known Homo sapiens fossils and evidence that modern humans first emerged in Ethiopia about 200,000 years ago. That theory was shaken by the discovery of, they say, a 300-year-old bone in Morocco in 2017. It says, which seems to belong to Homo sapiens, right? Which seems to belong to Homo sapiens. Now let's look a little deeper. This is why you got to look deeper into these things. Go into the source itself, right? It says oldest human Homo sapien rewrites our species history, right? So let's get a little understanding on what we can see here. So it says remains from Morocco dated, they say, this old, push back our species origins by, say, 100,000 years, suggest we didn't evolve only in East Africa. All right. So they say in Morocco and everything, that's still said Africa. They'll say that's said Africa. So let's get a little understanding, because what they'll try to connect it to is a type of Garden of Eden in Africa. So they say, oh, Garden of Eden in Africa and everything. So they say it has settled. It was in an area. But ask yourself, is this a modern human or is this a Neanderthal? Is this a modern human or is this a pre-flood Neanderthal? Let you know. Researchers guess that they were 40,000 years old and proposed that Neanderthals had lived in North Africa. Well, that's interesting, because that's what is important to know, is that if we're using Neanderthals, then all game is used, because Neanderthals, we can find Neanderthals outside of Africa before that time frame. So yes, we do find Neanderthals in Africa, but a Neanderthal that's found in Africa is matched with a Neanderthal found outside of Africa. So that's what they're trying to use when they're trying to note this, that they'll try to claim that this was a modern human. But if you link it very more and more closer, you'll find out that it's not a Homo sapien, but it's actually a Neanderthal. If you look very closer and look at tell them to show you the haplogroup. If it's a modern human, let's see the haplogroup. Let's see what is their haplogroup. What lineage is this? Is this A? Is it A0? What lineage are we looking at here? You won't find the haplogroup, because when they conclude it as a modern human, because it's in Africa, they also conclude that it's a Neanderthal. In the same places where you'll see them connected as a modern human is the same place where you'll start to see that they're connected as a Neanderthal. In fact, they'll try to say that it's as Hublin says his team, tried and failed, watch what it says here, to obtain DNA from Jebel, those bones, right? They failed to pull DNA from it. Why? Right? A genomic analyst could have clearly established whether the remains lie on the lineage that leads to modern humans. Why is it saying that that's leading to modern humans? Didn't they just say it was a human? This is a Neanderthal. That's why. It's because it's a Neanderthal. They're trying to link modern humans and try to make them an African based upon a Neanderthal that they found in Africa, when Neanderthals are said supposed to be millions of years old outside of Africa. So if if it's based off of Neanderthals, right? He knew that they weren't. He says they weren't Neanderthals, but they seemed too young and primitive looking to be human, Homo sapiens. You see what it's saying there? They're saying, "Oh, I don't know if they're Neanderthals. I don't know if they're humans, right?" But with the older dates and the new bones, right? Stringer agrees that the Jebel, that one bones, right, stand firm on, they say, Homo sapien lineage. So no evidence, no ability to pull up the genetics, but just conclude that it must be a modern human. You see what I'm saying here? Tell them to pull up evidence to show you that that's a modern human, instead of saying, you know what, we don't know if it's a Neanderthal, we don't know if it's a modern human, but you know, it seems like a modern human. That type of conclusion can be concluded with multiple different finds. That's why I was showing you the other day, this said human that said right here, they say that he's this old. Then how come the set, even said humans, can be found in layers this old in Israel? How come we can find humans this old in Israel? Right here where it says 350,000-year-old, right? Turning pot. Who makes turning pots? Who knows how to make a turning? Can an animal make a turning pot? Right? It just talks about that, of a single rock used, right, to abrade materials, probably hides, right? And different limbs, right? Outside of Africa. Older than the ones that are found in Africa that they couldn't pull up any genetics from. They try to conclude as a modern human. Yet they cannot conclude that as a modern human. You see what I'm saying here? So if we, and this is just one piece out of many pieces. There's multiple, there's millions, the stuff that's millions of years old, said millions of years old, that are humans outside of Africa. So you can get an understanding that if you're getting things that are biased, right? Because right here it talks about a great leap towards, a great leap towards, it says usage of tools goes back at least 300 million years. So it'll talk about humans having tools a long time ago, right? It says predating big brain humans by 500 years. So trying to make people bound to Africa when you got people making fire 300,000 years ago. You got different people in different, right? Very, very important when you look at these things and get into these things. And they'll always try to, when you see these humans and different things like that, they'll try to link them to modern humans, right? Even previously, the oldest known tools were 2.6 million years old, right? Those post-dates the oldest known fossils associated with humans, right? Just talk about that, going to 2.8 million. It says, they say hominins, including modern human, Homo sapiens, and our basic predecessors and everything. Right? They'll talk about basically they'll have connections to modern people, but there's never a haplogroup pulled. There's never a genetic group pulled. But a lot of times, if you look careful, a lot of these, they know that they're Neanderthals. A lot of the individuals who they found are Neanderthals. Modern humans, we need to see a haplogroup so that we can confirm that people came from either that place or that place. Because if we're relating it based upon human likeness, someone that's like to a human, we can find older human likeness outside of Africa, outside of Africa. So that's something, these are things that, like this is things I'm talking about, that really, if you break it down, you'll find out that it'll be connected with Neanderthals. They'll say, is it Neanderthal? Well, we don't know if it's Neanderthal or if it's modern human. We'll just say it as modern human. Just so, you can connect people to Africa so that they can be in Africa. But that's why I was showing you that Neanderthals, information on Neanderthals are outside of Africa. And even Denisovans are found over here. So that's why I'm showing you these ancient things to understand that if you want to start pulling up haplogroups and information, we start finding them over here very early. We find modern humans over there very early. So very important. They'll talk about the Denisovans being a little different from the Neanderthals, but that's why I showed you the Neanderthals and Denisovans were mixing, and modern humans. So that's something that's important. So I guess to summarize it, to get a little understanding on all these things that I'm talking about here, is that based upon the biblical narrative, you got to take the biblical narrative before you take the false science. The science that they try to illustrate, a lot of the science that they try to illustrate, a lot of it's madness, right? What was the haplogroup of the very first people of South America? How did the one come into America? So just to make a conclusion on the understanding of peopling, let me go back. If you was to find a group in Africa, some of the oldest groups that you would find in Africa would be A group, because the A group, as we have recorded before on E1B1A, the information on E1B1A tells you that it replaced the original inhabitants of Africa, which were A and B groups. And we also know that A groups settled in Africa sooner. That was something that did happen. A groups settled in Africa sooner, but they were in other places too. That's one thing to also understand, that A groups didn't just settle in Africa. They was in multiple places. Like you can see just some of these ones right here. These are some of the places in Kenya, right? A groups in Africa, Kenya, right? South Africa and things like that. They're going to be some of the early inhabitants. You can also get the B groups right here, right? Cameroon, things like that. They're going to be settled in Africa. But we had talked about some of them that settled outside of Africa. So these are just some that settled inside Africa and things like that. Those will be the earlier inhabitants of Africa. But you can note that A00 is different than A1. A1 and A2 and things like that. A groups are different than A00. A00 is a little different, as you can see. Then they go into Africa later. But first they're in Russia, Belgium, Spain, Russia again. So you can see A00 is outside of Africa for a long time before it goes into Africa. So very important. And then later on, you're going to get, remember, A00 is just a sign of all the groups together. A and B are different than your CT groups. A and B doesn't make CT, but they're all going to be related by family. BT and CT is the splits, is where you're going to get everyone. So you're going to get your A and B, which are Hamites. You're going to get and remember, A00 is different than your regular A and Bs. A00 is different than your regular A and Bs. A00 is going to be a little different. It's a sign of the root. And so A and B is going to be different. Then you got your split at CT. You're going to have a D, E, and CF lineage. So D, E, and CF, those are going to be your said modern people. And that's from your DE is where you're going to get E1B1A. That goes into Africa. And replace the original inhabitants. So like I was saying, right? You can find the information easy. If you just look up A00, right? It'll tell you right off of A00 or the A page. If you don't wiki, got sources on it. You can look at the source. It'll talk about what happened to the people of original Africa and everything. So let's talk a little bit about that, where it says that. You can see right here where it talks about E1, where the E come from. It says according to Wood 2005 and 2007, it just talks about what happened with that area. There was some changes with a now dominant E1B1A lineages. It says traces of ancestral inhabitants. Ancestral mean the oldest inhabitants, however, who's the oldest inhabitants of Africa, however, can be observed today in these regions. These are the presence of the Y DNA haplogroup of A, M91, and B, M60, right? Those are groups we see in ancient groups like the Mbuti and the Koshin. So get a little understanding that the oldest groups in Africa were the A and B groups, right? Before you even get the CT groups going into Africa, right? We can also look in the E1B1A area, and it says that it'll tell you the same information, right? It'll talk about the same thing. right here. It'll talk about the replacement that happened according to Woods 2005 and 2007, right? It talks about the population that was existing in that area being replaced by a now dominant E1B1A1 lineage, right? Traces of the earlier inhabitants, however, can be observed in these regions, right? Of basically A1A, A1B, A2 and A3, and BM60, right? Which are found in the Mambuti and the Koshin, not the Bantu. The Bantu are the E groups that go down there. So that's very important. That's why they call it Bantu expansion. That replaces the people that was in Africa. That's very important. So all these obviously cited by sources. You can take a look at the sources to get a little understanding on those things and everything. Let you know what was going on of the replacement. So that's talking fossils, right? That's talking actual fossils of who was down there and who got replaced, right? And who came down there, right? I already talked about it. The Mota, when they went down into the Mota cave, to the Mota area, and then they spread throughout the whole area. We know Mota has E1B1A2 and E1B1A1. They have M2 and they have the twin lineage, which is E1B1C, which is this one. That's I already went over that. Show the fossils of Mota having two different lineages. One is M2 and one is E1B1C. Those are going to be twin lineages that happened and went down there and started to take over the areas of Africa later on, right? So that's going to be something that's important to know, that this is a lineage that we just know came down there and took over. So that's just something that's important. It's not a lineage that's been there as long as these lineages. As they say, A00 been there for a long time. Origins of A00 supposed to be your oldest human lineage, right? But we found that outside of Africa before we get people to claim that people began in Africa is false, because we got to look at fossils. And to claim it based upon a Neanderthal is bogus. So that's very important. You gotta see a haplogroup. So very important. So the reason why we're doing this is just to get a little understanding on these things, to get a little summary on these things. But if anyone got any questions, let me know. We're going to touch those questions before we end this real fast. I can still see, for some reason, this thing reset. I can't see nothing on here, but all that. Yep. Being not migrant. That's right. Let me see what we just said there. Okay, rewatch. Yep. I heard that modern human beings did not migrate or originate of Africa. Could you repeat where humans being originated and from where? No problem. So where did humans originate? So here's a summary of where the humans originate. Based upon the biblical narrative, humans originated around Mount Ararat. Based upon historical documents, we also know that humans expanded out from Mount Ararat. Based upon some of the writings of Flavius Josephus, they went into the mountains and some went into the plain, and they counted this area as the plain. They counted Syria, or not Syria, Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent, where you see basically Shinar and Babel, where they built the Tower of Babel. They call that the plain. So some was in the mountains and some was in the plain. So where did people start? They started around this area. In fact, sometimes you'll see these offshoots where humans would shoot from here and bend around, or shoot from here and go up here. They'll shoot from here and settle up here, or they'll shoot from here and they'll bend around. And that's why you see some bend around like this, and you see some still shoot out and go across here. So humans actually began over here, right? Humans actually began over there, right here, not actually down here. They didn't actually begin down here. We don't actually get fossils. And that's why when you look at Neanderthal information, the Neanderthals began over here in all these areas, but they did go down into Africa, the Neanderthals. They did. This actually used to not be desert. This used to be green. And there used to not be any water here. And a lot of this was different when the Neanderthals millions of years ago, they went in there. But really, the reason why you're seeing a lot of those millions of years is because when the flood happened and they're dating these things as pre-flood, the dates are astronomical, because you can just imagine how much settlement and different things are falling on the earth. So that's very important. But the truth is that the people that's pre-flood, every last one of them is wiped out. That's what a Neanderthal is. They're pre-flood people. Every Neanderthal is wiped out. There's no living Neanderthal today. All of them are wiped out. They would be the children of Cain and the Nephilim that came down. That's just something that's important to understand, that those are pre-flood, and the dates are astronomical because of that. Everyone that's after the flood is modern people today, from Ham, Shem, and Japheth. That's Ham being A and B, that's Shem being D and E, and Japheth being CF. All three of those we can get on a boat. All three of those we can get on a boat and have Ham, Shem, and Japheth land just fill the whole earth, which that's all we see is those modern. We only see A and B, we only see D and E, and we only see CF people today. That's what we see today. The only people we see today are those lineages. That's how the biblical narrative tells us that from Ham, Shem, and Japheth, the whole earth was populated. So we can bring everyone back to those three lineages. CF as Japheth, DE as Shem, and A and B as Ham. So, and that's what we see. And then understanding the difference of that A00, which is the root, evidence of the root, evidence of Adam, evidence of the root in peoples, right? We can actually find that, like we said, 100,000 years ago outside of Russia. So based on the out of Africa scale, people were out of Africa before people can claim that people came out of Africa. So that's just something that's important. There's no other fossil that's datable or can actually see a haplogroup of a person. The male and the male female, the male's Y-DNA and the female's mtDNA. That's how we know as a modern human, when we can look at the mtDNA and compare them. That's the only way we can conclude that these people are actually going to be out of Africa. If you cannot see a haplogroup, then it's probably not even a human, or not a modern human. It's going to actually be either a Neanderthal or an ancient Denisovan. So that's just something that's very important to understand. That sometimes you'll have Denisovans and sometimes you have Neanderthals, and those will be pre-flood peoples that were mingling together with peoples. That some people were also mingling with them. But anyone who is today are going to be after the flood. Just to make the summary of that. And that's what we found in evidence. So if someone says that they found people in Africa older than people outside of Africa, we know that we have evidence of people outside of Africa before we get people in Africa. If we're talking Neanderthals, Denisovans, and things like that, ancient peoples. But if we're talking modern peoples, we got to look at those haplogroups. A modern person is going to be either of A00 or A or B or D or E or C and F. And we have to look at that carefully so that we know that there's a modern human versus a Neanderthal or Denisovan. So a lot of times the out of Africa concept was based upon Denisovans and Neanderthals, people that were not technically modern people. So that's something that's important to understand, that modern people, especially modern people, don't come out of Africa. They actually begin outside of Africa. Because we know the oldest fossils of people, like we say, outside of Africa, Russia. A lot of times they're in Russia, Belgium, Spain, things like that, before they even go into Cameroon, right? That's like 30,000 years of difference, right? Major difference if we're considering that understanding. So with that conclusion, if you have any questions, let me know. But just for the clarity, when we go over this stuff, we do not believe the out of Africa concept because it has not been proven. But we do believe that Noah existed because he has been proven. Noah, since we've been working on this, we have a lot of different pieces of information where we know that Noah existed. We know that Noah himself was a lineage of a person that is provable. His children are provable. He is someone that we know had existed. In fact, let me make sure I read one last thing before we take off. And this last thing is going to be basically about the same concept, how people are connected, how people are rooted together and everything. Yeah. No problem. As always, when you brothers and sisters think about these things and you have questions and you go over these things, it really brings light to the whole community on what's really going on with these things, what's really going on. So it's just something that brings a lot of understanding to, the race world that the world just kind of got out of, if it got out of, right? If it actually got out of. It might be that the world didn't really get out of that racism and is trying to keep it low because of cameras. Or it could be that it's still at its level of where it's at, but you just don't hear about it as much. So remember, the world was very racist. And some people don't think that that matters, but it does matter when trying to understand truths. When you're trying to understand truth, you got people that's altering stuff. Let me actually go to it on here because for some reason a note not open, but I want to grab one more note here and talk about this last piece. Last piece here. I'm just gonna grab something here that I just made a note on that I think is important. All right. I don't think it's this one, but I'm going to grab it real fast. Here it is. Let me see if it's this one. Because I made a note on a thing that's kind of complex. And for some reason, every time I share it, here it is, it gets deleted. But this is a piece of information that I think is important to understand. Right? It just has this little connection to it. Just close that. All right, so I was talking about this before. Where does it split at BT and CT, right? BT and CT is where you're going to get your A and B, and also where you're going to get all other lineages, right? I'm going to put this in the description. This just talks about the biblical narrative. I'll just quickly summarize it. This is what they found out, right? It just talks about the start of the, right here, it starts, rather continues the evolution trunk of human Y chromosome at the upper left side of the tree. So it says immediately reaches the first fork of A0T. So they'll say after A00 comes A0T. The name of the haplogroup is not shown in the tree. It says we see a split of A0T and haplogroups A1B, which is now A0. It says which goes up the tree and everything, whatnot. It says, in other words, we see a departure of a first set African branch, A0, from the main tree. And watch what it says here about A0. None of non-African groups under haplogroup T, right? Remember, DE comes from CT. So it's saying none of the non-African groups, haplogroup CT among them, descend from that departed haplogroup A0. So it's basically saying that A1B doesn't make CT lineages. That means that we're not connected in that way. We're not connected in the way that a lot of people think we are. We're actually connected at BT and CT. It's actually where people are connected. Mainly for those that are CF lineages like J's or R's or T's or anything like that, they are going to be under CF, under CT, right? DE as well. The YAP lineage is under CT, right? And it talks about the next fork and everything, and talks about those other lineages, right? It talks about the other A lineages, right? Other said African lineages of A. It says none of the non-African groups under CT among them descend from the second African branch, A1A, and its subclades, right? The third fork is represented by, it just talks about every single fork, right? And then it talks about BT, shown in the lower part of the tree. Figure 2 says it is, now watch what it says here. It is obvious that haplogroup BT does not descend from the African haplogroups having index A. It's telling you that A doesn't make BT, but BT makes A, since all of them are positioned in the upper right of the figure tree, which BT is at the lower part. Because on the way that the tree is designed, on what it's talking about here, which actually saved at the bottom, is that BT and CT makes everyone. BT and CT makes everyone, right? Going a little more, it does not mention CT clade, right? Just talk a little more on how it splits. Have identified some African bearers of certain subclades. So who's in Africa? Remember we talked about that A and B groups that are African. A0s, A1s, right? All these A1s, all these, which they found in low frequencies in Africa, right? In certain areas right here, to in Cameroon and Ghana and South Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, and whatnot. All these subclades are located they just talk about where they are up in the tree. That means they break off. It says, indeed belong to African subclades. So they say these are in African. A and B, especially A's are in Africa. And they migrated, it says, or they migrated into Africa relevantly recent, right? And watch what it says here, right? Watch what it says here. And none of BT or CT lineages descend from them. So what's it concluding there, right? This is why we use family tree for the way that they're linked. But remember, family tree is using a normal chart, not a unrooted chart, which I talked about before. An unrooted chart actually shows you the way that they break. But if we note BT and CT, which if you know anything about genetics, you need to know about BT and CT, because that's going to tell us how people are actually linked. You don't start from here and think everyone's linked like that, because this is a normal chart. This is not an unrooted chart. This is a normal chart. But people are linked right here. BT, everything under BT, including these, are 1. Everything under BT, including these, are 1 under BT. And BT makes A and B. BT makes A and B, and then there's a split. CT is not made by A. That's important. That's what it's concluding. A doesn't make CT, because BT and CT actually are going to be your split. That could have been a man with a group called BT and CT at the same time, BT and CT, and made A and B groups, and made CF groups and DE groups. You know what I'm saying? When I'm saying that, I had went over before on how that split is possible, how you can have one person, right? Even if he started with A00, he could have made a BT and CT, and then from BT, CT, you get A and B lineages, right? From BT, right here, you get A and B, and from CT, you get CF, so CF and DE. But let's note this CT. The main one I want you to focus on is CT, because CT makes CF and DE. That means DE is not linked to A and B like that. DE isn't as old as A and B. You understand what I'm saying? And understand these are not even that old. When you take the mutation rate, they're about all these are 6,000 years old. If you take the mutation rate, I can show you that with a geneticist that takes the mutation rate and can confirm that these are actually 6,000 years old. If you take the mutation rate, that they can't mutate the way that they were trying to express with the thousands and thousands of years, that the mutation rate is only 6,000 years. But this DE right here is going to be a brother with CF. So remember, DE is more closer to CF than it's closer to A and B. DE is more closer to CF, and CT, which A and B doesn't make, which A does not make CT, but these are going to be brothers. So again, let's take a look at that, right? You can see when we look at these things a little careful, right? When we're talking about these things, let me make sure I'm on the right spot. It says, and none of BT or CT lineages descend from them. Who is the them that is talking about? From these. It's saying that CT and BT doesn't descend from all these A groups. So none of BT and CT descend from them. So how can they be claimed as ancestral or non-African lineages? Ancestral to non-African lineages. What does it mean, ancestral? Why are they claiming that the A lineages make other lineages? Like CF and DE. They're not linked that way. They're just not linked that way. So that's what it's saying. How could they be claimed as ancestral, right? None of the actual bearers of A0T, A1, A1B have been found in Africa or elsewhere. So how can it be claimed as African? Just because they're assigned A letter in the index? As we see, all those conjunctories, right? Very important of that out of Africa idea, out of Africa concept are groundless. Saying that the out of Africa concept is groundless. Doesn't even work monophylactically. People aren't even connected that way. Again, conclusion, ancestors of the most present day non-Africans did not come from Africa in the last 30 to 600 years, 600,000 years at least. It's saying that they didn't come from Africa at least to 600,000 years. They didn't come from Africa. In other words, those who migrated from Africa or were forcibly taken out as slaves are not ancestors of the contemporary Europeans, Asians, Native Americans, Australians, right? What have you, right? This follows from the whole multitude of data, right? And all the different information of the archaeology and the genetics and all that stuff, right? And the genome, all that DNA, all that stuff, right? All this stuff that they found based upon actual studies. Study of the DNA excavated bones of Neanderthals has shown in them MCR, basically just to talk about some things, but not what not, in the same variant as in modern humans. So remember how I was showing you that sometimes people be using Neanderthals they found in Africa and linking them to modern humans, because modern humans and Neanderthals are human. Neanderthals are human. And that's why I was showing you something with individuals with red hair, right? Which makes pale skin and red hair observed in modern humans. So it just talks about basically some humans who have red hair and pale skin. They got that from the Neanderthals. Is that they got a mixture that the Neanderthals also had that as well, because that's just human. This is something that humans have, right? Observed in modern humans, right? Though according to the study authors, humans did not inherit MCRI from Neanderthals. So it's very important. So you see what they're saying? They know that looking at Neanderthals, they have some things that are similar to humans, but some studies try to say that they didn't get that from the Neanderthals. But we do know that Isham and other humans were mixing with Neanderthals. We know that because we got papers that say Isham was mixing from 60,000 years to later in Russia. There was not, right? There was not any data that Neanderthals were Black Africans. So you see what it's saying there? So it's saying that the Neanderthals were not Black Africans. So indeed, no Neanderthals were found in Africa, right? So now that's one of the things that also is important to understand. This was in 2014 when this paper came out, they did find some Neanderthals in Africa. That's where you see some of those things where they were trying to compare people to these Neanderthals, but the Neanderthals are mainly in the upper north, but some did go into Africa. Since modern humans and Neanderthals are cousins, they say, have had a common ancestor, that common ancestor likely had fair skin and light hair color and did not live in Africa. So it's letting you know that some people are connected, that they are actually outside of Africa. That was between 30 or 300 to 600 years before present, right? KYA, 1,000 years ago, right? 360,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. There is still a puzzle how our fair-skinned ancestors would split about 160,000 years ago, and one branch of them migrated into Africa. So they say one branch of them did migrate into Africa, right? Adjusted to African climate, right? Which was different from today. So it's important to know is just talk about the climate of Africa was different from today, and acquired a black skin color. The answer lies apparently in regulation of melanin basically the way that melanin is made or is kept established. What's important too to understand is that a lot of people lost pigmentation, a lot of people kept pigmentation. It's just something that happened, right? It's very important. They talk about that's why it's a difficult story. That's why we keep close to the biblical narrative. But this, what you just heard, all this was from multiple geneticists that agree with this. Because run that thing, you can see in the conclusion, other geneticists give their conclusions thing, and they found it to be right. It just talks about basically what he found is true. Is what they found. They found out that what he found in these findings at this study of what was the individuals in Africa, he found out that it's true that the people didn't start in Africa. That people found out that people did not start in Africa. Speaking of which, I'll just show a little example here at the bottom. Let me just turn this. All right, so that's that tree I was showing you. That's that A00. So A00 makes all people, and it says all people are connected to a genetic atom, right? And we found that A00 outside of Africa, right? And it says that basically there's also people that's before this individual. But BT and CT is not created by any A group, because what it connect right here is they'll basically let you know that actually they break off, and these are them right here on the side of them. They will be on the side. Not that they make these ones, but rather they are connected, but they make their own. That's why if you look on family tree DNA, right, if you close this one, you can see this one right here. This is actually A00. This one right here is actually A00. And A00 is 0% of the tree. As you can see right here, 0% of the tree. It doesn't make any percentage of the tree. It makes its own. It makes its own lineages. And you can see they'll say Cameroon. And so it's different people. So Cameroon, different individuals and everything. There's more though. So you can see in America, some found in America and everything, right? There's some that's also found in different areas as well. But for a human, for 100% of the tree, this is A00, doesn't make any of the percentage of the tree. That's important because that's not how it splits. It doesn't split there. It splits at BT and CT. That's how when you get a split. But A00 just has, what's the word I'm looking for? Is a evidence that it has all the information of peoples, right? But it's not making CT and things like that. Though it's connected, it's going to be connected, basically having evidence of all peoples, having all the SNPs. But it makes its own lineages. That's why it's called A00 or 0% of the tree, or a genetic evidence of genetic atom, right? Very important. But as we know, as we get a little understanding, it'll talk about CT does not come from B, and as it is obvious from figure 2. So just talks about that in one of the figures. B and CT basically let you know that they break from BT. So it lets you know that that's a major important understanding when it comes to the connections. But let me go down to something on the bottom just to get a little understanding on these things, because there's some interesting conclusions on these things when they talk about the conclusions and everything. And it talks about how the people is mixed in and everything. So that's that part right there where they talk about the conclusion of all those things and whatnot. But you can see the references, who is referencing and everything, and who is connected to, and you see a lot of different people talking of these things and whatnot, right? So, for example, when it's talk about, you have probably seen one time they talked about the connection of the people in China and everything, and how certain things like that. It's an interesting read. It's a very interesting read when you see what's going on with a lot of these and whatnot. So just to clarify that and summarize it, I'll put it in a description that actually talks about the real way that people split, and obviously know the biblical narrative. So I just put Truth from Reddit. He did a great job expressing the biblical narrative. I think that's one of the best ways to understand it. And then another piece of information that we have went over. So this one's just a study. So very deep study on that one. So I'll put this in the description if someone wants to get a little more deeper into it. There's just some understanding that people do not start in Africa, right? That's just not where people came from. People did not start in Africa. It doesn't work for the genetic information. It doesn't work for the biblical information. So there's more stuff I can show to show people millions. I can show people's millions of years old and tools millions of years old outside of Africa and different things like that. Is one of those things that's no doubt is a sure thing. So just to make it clear, people don't start in Africa. And based upon biblical narrative of modern people don't start in Africa. And people split. The real split is at BT and CT, and that's when you'll see that at CT, CF and DE are their own lineages. So CF and DE. This is Japheth, this is Shem, and all this is Helm. So with that, that's all I got for you right now, family. Be blessed, be beloved, and amen.